thankfully, I'm a quick learner. And so the concepts that were taught, in undergraduate and then again in grad school, I mastered quickly and was fortunate to be in graduate school at University of Texas MBA program. The Dean of Technology asked me to help, says, well, you've kind of got this covered, right? Could you help teach these concepts to my undergrad students?
That is Joe Castro, CTO of Appirio and co-founder of Merivis. I'm Josh Birk, a developer evangelist for Salesforce, and here on the Salesforce Developer Podcast, you'll hear stories and insights from developers for developers. Today, we sit down with Joe and talk about what he was just talking about there a little bit, some of his passion for educating others. And a lot of this dovetails into his work with Merivis, an organization dedicated to helping military veterans get back in the workplace through Salesforce skills. And Merivis is a little thing that he co-founded with an old-time friend, Hector Perez.
Hector came to me, and this is in 2014, late 2014, early 2015, and he was already working at Salesforce and was involved with VetForce, and he's a veteran of the Air Force himself. He was of the Air Force, and he was Air Force medic and saw a lot of the struggles from people that he knew growing up and from the military, transitioning and finding work after they left the military. And the military, did so much for Hector, and he really wanted to give back. And so VetForce, when he was at Salesforce, was a great way to do that. But he saw at the time that it wasn't as easy as taking an admin class. Like, you couldn't just drop somebody that maybe joined the Army at age 17, didn't have a lot of corporate experience, that just throwing you in an admin 201 class wasn't a recipe for success. So he came to me, and at this time I was already I was a CTA, and I was training other architects to take the Certified Tech Arch Review Board. And he said, "Hey, would you mind helping me out? I want to give some veterans an opportunity to transition into great jobs at Salesforce, and Salesforce needs more people working in the ecosystem." And I'm like, "Sure, I'd love it." And so he asked this in 2015, and I signed on. And the interesting thing is, I signed on to help. And quite honestly, I would do anything for Hector. So just the fact that he asked, I probably would have done it anyway. But at that time, in 2015, I was an architect and working on some of the hardest problems that we see on Salesforce, right? If it could have been done easy, they didn't come to ask. And so being able to take some time out and remind myself what an impact you can make as an admin and the things that you can accomplish with workflows and process builder and formula fields was a welcome relief. And it really kind of made me fall in love with the platform again.
What are some advantages that a military experience brings to somebody trying to learn the Salesforce ecosystem?
There's a lot of different things there, but a couple of the things that I've noticed over the years is that the attention to detail, right? Mm-hmm. Salesforce is a great platform to innovate quickly. We always say fails fast, fix it, get to that next version.
Right.
But sometimes it is very helpful to sit back and say, yes, you have somebody that's thinking through the details of saying, well, you just described something to me, but did you consider this, and this? This is, we're ignoring this user group, or here's a logical outcome that we haven't addressed. The level of detail that I've seen in general from the vets that have come through Merivis and VetForce in general, Salesforce Military now, has been incredible. And that experience, their real world experience, has been tremendous. The second thing, though, is they deal with things at scale, right? Mm-hmm. You talk about operating in a team, right? You talk about, we're building this for a set of sales reps that, there's 5 teams of 10 sales reps, right?
Yeah.
They may have been in a platoon of 2,000 or managing so much more, the scale of what they did. And, they might be literally riding on top of a nuclear warhead, in a submarine, right? Right? They don't get rattled. The scale that the vets are used to, and, what is really life and death, it puts it in perspective when you're, trying to make sure that I've set up sales path correctly so that a sales rep doesn't get a validation rule error.
Right. And how would you describe the Merivis method, and why do you think it's been so successful?
From the beginning, and we started Merivis, this was even before Trailhead, we thought at first that we were about giving content, giving perspective, so that when a vet landed in the Admin 201 class, that they'd be in a better position to succeed, pass their exam, and get into a job, transition to a job in Salesforce, in the Salesforce ecosystem. However, what we soon realized, because Hector and I were overwhelmed, At first, Hector and I were trying to meet individually with every one of the vets. We'd hold office hours, we'd, do this, but we needed help. So we started reaching out to our own networks and inviting people to coach. And so what ended up happening is Merivis became a way to connect veterans and military spouses with people in the ecosystem. And it became a very high touch, like very personal model of being able to say, I'm having problems, and this might be a technical problem because I don't understand this workflow or this formula field.
Right.
What happens? Why can't I get a pick list value to show up on this formula field? It could be technical. It could just be, what really does an administrator do? Right? It could be, I'm struggling to understand, what my career path is going to be. But Merivis became that outlet, or that way that we were able to connect a veteran with, giving them a mentor to show them what their career path could be.
Yeah.
And that's really, that high touch model is really paid benefits, and it really is keeping us relevant today. We've expanded the programs that we offer. We've expanded, the types of, homework that we give, the assignments, the prep work. But at the heart of it, it's connecting it. We really take pride in making that personal connection between a coach and the individual veteran and military spouse.
Nice. And Merivis started as something of a regional effort, but what is its range now?
We started out in Texas, in Austin, because that's where Kate, Hector, and I lived, and so it was easy to do. Just locally here, and there was a lot of demand just in Texas. But what we soon found out is we held a what we call a cohort, which is about a 5-week program. We had 3 weeks of prep where we kind of get them. Today they're working on Trailhead content and custom Merivis homework assignments with their coaches. And then week 4, they show up for a class, which is the in-person Admin 201 class. And the final week is of kind of preparing you for your exam. Well, when we did that, what we found was, we said we primarily want to serve, vets in Texas. That way it wasn't a high cost for them to travel from San Antonio, let's say, to spend the week here for the in-person class. But we found that we were getting applicants from Georgia, from California, and New York.
Right.
And all of a sudden we were like, oh, well, this is, we need to expand, right? There's so many people coming. Where are other areas of the country where we could land a new home base? Because we do it's not required, but it is nice when a coach and the student, or our Merivis veteran, can meet up on a Salesforce Saturday and meet in person. That helps. We like having all of our veterans in a given geography to get together for happy hours or Salesforce Saturdays. It really has become a community, not just between the mentors and the veterans, but that's kind of their own network as well. So we expanded by necessity. And now we're offering classes in both San Antonio and within Texas. We're going to offer this year, but we've had cohorts that have run in Seattle. We're looking at stuff in DC this year. Boston has a tremendous amount of interest. San Diego. So we're in the middle of expansion right now, and it's a little crazy.
Nice. Well, speaking of crazy, with everything that is going on in the world today, what kind of strategy do you have for having a physical location versus virtual events?
Yes, we're really having to rethink, just like a lot of people, a lot of organizations are right now. What does it mean to give, to educate, collaborate, and get experience? Right. We really saw that, the face-to-face was a bonding moment, for everybody, and trying to not recreate that, but to get an equivalent, a bonding experience in this, in a virtual environment is a huge challenge. Now, we've taken a couple of things as our first steps to do it. And one is we want to make sure that, sometimes it's easy to gauge when somebody doesn't get it, when somebody's standing across the room and they see a blank stare. But what we're working on right now is a set of kind of fail-safes, where we're a little bit more explicit about the challenge that at least our admin cohorts, this introduction to Salesforce go through, so that they understand that, that admin exam is tough. Let's prepare you to take it. Let's talk about, if you don't pass it the first round, and a lot of people don't, let's talk about, automatically scheduling some office hours and some follow-ups with your coach so that we can get you past. So making sure that people don't fall through the cracks is something that we're having to do. A little bit extra effort and a personal touch. But then the other thing right now is finding ways for people to bond. And so we've got a couple of programs. The Merivis Fellows is kind of the prime one, where it favors real world project experience. And so we take, instead of just saying, oh yeah, read, go through this Trailhead, answer the questions, answer these homework questions, we say, oh, here's a problem. And a lot of them are real things that are problems at Merivis, right? It's, hey, we need a way to track certifications better for our alumni. Yeah. Or I need these fields on the contact object because we need to do X. So instead of me doing it or getting a volunteer to do it, we give this as an assignment for the Merivis Fellows, where they can collaborate on a real project that's solving a real need. Yeah. They're learning a little bit of Salesforce. They're learning how to operate on a project team. They're learning a little bit of DevOps because they have to take it from a sandbox and push it to production. Right. Not really something you talk about in admin class, but it's something that they need to learn. Yeah. So we're trying to, to shift a little bit, both to make sure people don't fall through the cracks, but in this time that we're not just giving more homework and more study, but trying to give them opportunities to interact on real projects.
Nice. I want to touch on that one part of that a little bit more, because it's something that constantly comes up when I talk to people about training or certification. How do you feel the act of failing something is part of the process of learning itself?
It is. Failure is a huge way, the best way I've learned. Right? People talk to me. People talk to me today. So I worked at Dell from 1998 to 2012. Yeah. And I built some amazing systems, especially in those early years, that were groundbreaking. And people today, and this is 15 and 20 years later, are talking to me about systems that I stood up and built in architecture 20 years ago. And the funny thing is, the reason they're talking to me is because when I look back at that, I'm like, gosh, how bad we did that, what we did wrong. Yes. And looking back at it, I know what I know today because of the huge failures that I had. Sorry, Michael Dell. But we overcame most of them, right. Obviously. But learning, failure is a critical component of learning. Yeah. Right. And so we take that fast forward to Merivis Fellows. I'll say this is, there was one change request that we had that we assigned to one of the Merivis Fellows, and I'll let him remain nameless. I probably won't, but I'll for now pretend like I'm remain nameless. And I knew it was something that that couldn't be done, like the way with a process builder, the way that he thought he was going to get it done. Yeah. And I knew he couldn't get it done, so I said, "Hey, well, work on this for a little bit, and then come back to me, and then we'll discuss it." Yeah. And I just left it at that. I said, "Don't just look at it for an hour, and then call me." So a couple days later, he called me. He's like, "All right, I've been staring at this for 12 hours, and I can't get it to work. It just won't work." And I'm like, yeah, I could have told you that to begin with. He was a little upset, but he understood the platform a lot better of some of the limitations. Right. And, we worked through it. But that real world experience, that failure, is what gives you the perspective to understand what are some of the things that Salesforce can help you do. Yeah. But it's also as important to know those kind of areas where it's not that Salesforce can't do it, but that you need to consider, are you using the right tool for the job? Right. Right. A process builder, a flow, well, flow can do more than a process builder, but it can't do everything. There are considerations where you need to do something, right? I can't fire a process builder on a delete, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember going to a barbecue for a company that I had left the year before. And I was talking to two developers, and it just sort of dawned on them. They're like, wait, you're the guy who wrote X, Y, and Z. I'm like, oh, yeah, I wrote all of that stuff. And they gave me this look of just awe and fear. And I'm like, oh, right. They're looking at my old code base. I should apologize now.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about specific solutions. What kind of software and tools are you using to help with the education?
Okay. So at first, when we thought, we're going to educate and train a set of veterans, we want to do this on the Salesforce platform first and foremost, right? And so, the first thing that we did, well, not the first thing. After we realized we couldn't run this program on email, we said, hey, let's run it on Salesforce. Yeah. And so, of course, we have a community where our veterans and coaches can meet, right? Yeah. And when we standard kind of community groups, we've got very specific things, types of groups depending on the class, depending on, a private group for you and your coach. And things were working well with that. We use Salesforce Knowledge for some best practices. Mm-hmm. And we had a custom object that was was giving our homework assignment. So, when I put you as a veteran, right, you ended up as a contact because you had to be a contact so I could give you a community user record, right, user license. But then that contact record, I would pair, I would say, hey, this contact is paired with this coach, and everybody's working on this cohort, right, which might be admin 201 or process builder, the app builder class. And so all of a sudden, now I said, here is a set of template quiz records that I'm going to instantiate, and I'm going to send you a quiz, and you're going to answer it. And so we use technologies like record types, where, what is shown when you're answering a quiz. When you submit it, it becomes visible now to your coach, right? So there was a little bit of sharing going on. And these were great things as examples, because as some of the homework assignments were referencing that record, that object that they were looking at. So I could teach using the technology that I was using to teach them. We ran that way for a few years, and that was very effective, except it had the downside of it was very homework centric. And so you got a grade.
Yeah.
Did you understand it or not? And I didn't like that, because it wasn't about you getting this question right. Mm-hmm. It was about provoking thought and being able to give a discussion, a start off point for discussions with your coach.
Right.
So last year, we took those same homework assignments and we really looked through them. We have to constantly, of course, thank you, Salesforce, make sure our homework is still relevant, because every release, something is no longer relevant.
Right.
But so we're constantly reviewing the homework. But what we did was we said, instead of generating and by the way, we generated the homework assignments using Flow, right? Because I can look and query a set of, what students are in this class that has now been activated, go get the template records and clone them so that they can create an individual assignment record, a homework record for them.
Right.
But instead, we've flipped over and we've put those questions into template quip docs. And with the same type of process, I generate a quip document, make sure it's shared out with the coach and with the students, so they still have a private area where they can collaborate, but there's no concept of the coach is giving them a score, right?
Nice.
That's enabled them to have, because quip kind of the hyper collaborative, right? They know when the other opens the document, so they can jump in. We can kind of in real time, I can monitor who's answering their homeworks. I can kind of jump in, or some other people can look at the homework and kind of be more collaborative while still respecting the privacy of the coach and the student.
Nice. And that's all vanilla Quip. You're not using any custom live apps or anything like that?
I'm exploring some live apps. This is vanilla Quip. I mean, we're using, the Quip, I think Quip 360, right? So this is initiated, from within Salesforce, on their cohort member record. That Quip doc you can see it, so I don't have to go out and search for it. But at the same time, there are some things that have to be, that need scripts. Like, in order to share a Quip doc with particular persons, right? I can't just do that from within Salesforce. So there's a few API calls that I'm making to Quip. But I am exploring a live app because, for instance, I want to give some pointers. Like, okay, I asked you a question here about a formula field or doing this. I want to give you the answer, but I want to kind of hide it until you ask for the answer. And so right now I just have this big section that says, hey, answers are below. I'm going to build a Quip Live app to hide that. And that's, again, that's fairly low overhead, but it's, it still requires me to learn a little bit more React than I know today.
I was going to say, it's also a really good excuse to dust off React. So
it is, exactly.
Well, speaking of things like gamification and changing things up, how has Trailhead altered your strategy?
Yeah, Trailhead is awesome. Once we realized that, a lot of the core things that we're trying to teach to bring people up to speed, right? Yeah. Trailhead gives not just, let me tell you what what record level security is, but there are trails that are intended for end users, right? And so that helps to give some of that background that Hector and I originally envisioned. Right. So what Hector and I were doing, explaining what a lead was and what is the difference between a contact and an account. Yeah. Right? And some of those things, Trailhead takes care of and keeps up to date, and it's wittier, funnier, more engaging than the content we were creating, even though I consider myself a very funny person. So Trailhead really helped us dramatically. But what it also did was it showed us, it gave our veterans and military spouses an outlet to show how committed and engaged they would be in this ecosystem.
Yeah.
I can't tell you these people. There are several people. A lot of my vets that are Merivis vets have more Trailhead badges than I do.
Nice.
Right? And it's, you're looking at it and you're like, it shows the ability to learn.
Yeah.
But it's given us the ability as well to identify those people who are on fire and helped us connect them to the right jobs.
Nice.
Because it's not just about training, right? Our intent is the same as Salesforce Military. It's to be a partner with our veterans and military spouses, to help them get into jobs in the Salesforce ecosystem and to progress in their careers. So Trailhead has been an incredible way for us to help them get that base knowledge, identify the people, like their interest, and kind of plug them in with our network of contacts.
Nice. Okay, so this is a bit of a random question because it's something you mentioned briefly when we were talking earlier, and I'm not sure how it fits, but the term itself made me very curious. What is a 2-minute sprint?
The 2-minute drill.
2-minute drill. There we go.
2-minute drill. So I also like to train architects that are trying to take the CTA review board. And so I do a lot of that formally at Appirio and just in general. But one of the things that I saw was a lot of people, they went and they got some of their architect certifications and said, I did this, this, and this. Now I want to go take the CTA review board.
Yeah.
Right. And, I'm very involved in that program. And I've seen a lot of people come away from that and just, like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot. And so I couldn't put it all together.
Yeah.
But what I noticed was there's a core set of competencies that you need to know.
Yeah.
Large data volumes, like record level security, right? Where do I, org strategy, mobile strategy, all of these topics that come up on the exam.
Yeah.
And I'm like, think of this like if you were training for the decathlon. Training for the decathlon, you need to master individual. You got to master the high jump. You got to master the pole vault. You do all that separate, and you train until you master it.
Right.
And then on game day, it's still going to be hard. You have to string all of those together, but you need to train individually. So the 2-minute drill was my attempt at having a YouTube presence of going on and saying, because I did this with a lot of my architects at Appirio to get them ready for the exam.
Yeah.
I said, okay, I'm going to do is I'm not going to give you an 8-page scenario, which is what you see in the review board, roughly. But I'm going to give you a paragraph. I'm going to describe a scenario.
Yeah. I
want you to listen to it, and I want you to give yourself 2 minutes to think about it.
Oh, wow.
Just 2 minutes, and then I want you to record yourself for another 2 minutes explaining your answer. Just 2 minutes, and then then I'm like, hey, pause right here in my video, and then I'll tell you what I was thinking. Not that what I was thinking was right, but this was the intent of this exam. And so the concept being, if you get familiar where you can recognize this is a problem where I can plug it in with the right answer, and do that quickly and repetitively, then you'll be more prepared to string all of that training together and pass the review board.
Got it. Nice. Very neat. So what's your favorite success story out of Merivis?
Favorite success story out of Merivis?
I know I'm asking you to pick from your favorite children.
It's hard, and I have to go back to to one of the originals.
Yeah.
And this is a success story about Sheldon Simmons, and he was actually featured last year in Dreamforce in the keynote, and we're blessed to have him. And there are a lot, and I'm going to steal this and make sure I talk about two people. Okay. But Sheldon, in particular, he came through and he showed us a few things. Right? He was struggling with a few different jobs, and at the time where he came to the Merivis cohort, he was working the night shift, on a factory line. And what he didn't tell us was he was working the night shift all night, driving straight to the admin class, sleeping for an hour in his car, and then going through the admin class at day.
Wow.
And he did that. And I said, this was our first cohort. So I was sitting in the back of the room. I was trying to gauge, how every individual was engaged. Were they learning?
Yeah.
What did I need to do? And he never dozed off. He was engaged. Wow. I was impressed with him even then.
Yeah.
But he took that class and of course he struggled afterwards because he didn't pass the first time, the admin exam. He didn't pass the second time. Even when he did pass, he didn't just get a job. And so, we, had to work and get some real world experience, volunteering. So the Sheldon experience is, it's all on him at that point. It was a story of perseverance. Wow. Like he kept at it. It was 6 months later and he finally got a great job.
Nice.
And you should listen to him tell his experience and his story. But he's a success story. But what it showed us is that you can't just offer training, right? We need to be there to say, all right, you've got individual needs that need to be met.
Yeah.
Whether that's an accommodation for life, right, offer more virtually, or if it's we need to be more involved in getting our veterans more experience because people just don't hire a certificate. They want to know that you've had real world experience.
Right.
And so that's helped us pivot to be able to give a more real-rounded, not just being a training organization. But Sheldon is just a great story. He now sits on our board of directors, right?
Nice.
And he works at Slalom. He is, he's a consultant in his own right, and he's killing it. And this is, 5 years ago to now, his life has changed. It's not just that he got a job, right? His entire, trajectory for him and his family has changed. And that's a great success story. But if I take Sheldon's experience, he was already out of military. He was struggling. Yeah. And I turn around and I look at what Merivis has been able to do, and in particular, Sheldon's story and through a few other of his friends, we're able to get the story of Merivis to Roger Miranda, who was still on active duty. And when he came to us, Roger said, I'm doing this so that I'm not worried about how I'm going to feed my family when I retire from the military. Right. And, and both of them are amazing stories because they're both very much involved in the Merivis community and the veteran community and the Salesforce military because they're climbing up, but then they're sending that elevator back down, right? They're lighting a path for others to follow. And both of them excelling in their careers, tremendous stories. Yeah. But they've helped shape what Merivis is, which is a personal connection of understanding how can I help you get to that next level, right? It's one of our slogans from Merivis is, the next mission is you, right? That's what we like to tell our veterans, right? We're here to help you on your next mission.
And I think if I recall from Sheldon's story, there's a video, we'll link to that in the show notes, but there was a phrase he used, something like pulling people forward, like when you're the next person on the mountain. How much do you see that with Merivis?
Oh, it's incredible. So I will get, right. So I do get questions when people say, Joe, I got a job doing this and I don't know what I'm going to do. Right? Yeah. And so I get a lot, and I love being there. I love hearing the challenges that everybody's getting. But more often than not, they're pinging each other. Right? Nice. They've become that family, that support system outside of the military that, quite honestly, the military gave them when they were deployed. Yeah. They've become that network for each other, and so they truly visit that. Like Roger, he was like saying, "I'm doing this, and I want this to be the pattern, so that future, the future people that come down this path don't get out of the military without knowing what they want to do. I want to show them this is a great way to build your next career."
Right.
And so that idea, and I think it was Hector that said, is like, when you reach the top of the mountain, make sure you send that elevator back down.
Nice.
And we see that every day. Every day right now, Kate Perez, who's our executive director, gets a call saying, how can I help? How can I volunteer? We have alumni, a lot of our alumni that want to be coaches for that next class of recruits. And these are people that are 2 or 3 years into a career. They're admins or they're working on project work, app builder, but they're like, I want to help. And we've learned that's a great recipe for success.
That's just amazing stuff. Okay, well, let's move a little bit over to your other role, as CTO of Appirio. And we touched on this with the 2-minute drills, but what are some of the strategies that you have for training people into architecture?
Training, architecture is an interesting thing because it means different things to different people, right? To some people, an architect is just a senior developer. Right.
Right.
And quite honestly, when I got to Appirio, and I came here from Accenture in 2014, it was a blended role. So we had architects and kind of lead developers or tech leads that filled the same role. And so there was no guidance. Right. Now, today, when I talk about what architecture means, we're now part of the of Wipro we acquired in 2016. It's a much different landscape where an individual set of code that solves a problem may work, but it may cause greater issues further on, right? Yeah. A great example is, we've when I talked about that same issue with files, right? We've got this great little class that stores files in AWS, and so that when you need to retrieve the actual attachment from the Salesforce record, it grabs them, right? Yeah. Well, that's great, and somebody built it, but the problem was they didn't think about Well, long term, if I need to share this with different users, different things, with different types of users, how are they going to access this? Because they did some things like give it permissions using a permission set today. This was recent change, that was locked to the standard license, or they were querying for very specific things. And so the architect has to take of saying, I'm going to meet today's problem, but I'm going to put future considerations, and I'm going to think about one thing. I'm going to steal a phrase from a book, the Unicorn Project, which so if you've read it. But they talk about, not technical debt, but complexity debt, right? And so the complexity debt, because not all debt is technical, right? And they define complexity debt, and this was, I forget who originally coined this in 2003, because I didn't read the book that stringently, but they talk about complexity debt being the amount of pain that you're going to experience the next time you need to address this area.
Right.
And so the architect's domain is being able to predict what is going to be that complexity debt. And so I try and get my architects to understand the bigger picture. Solve the problem for today, and understand that, one of the things that I've had to do over the years is make a ton of considerations. But when you make a consideration for technical or business process or timeline reasons, that you need to set it up in a way that minimizes that future debt.
That's our show. Now, before we go, I did ask Joe what his favorite non-technical hobby was, and it turns out, well, he kind of likes the outdoors.
So I always have been a lake rat. So we live in Austin, and so we live very close to Lake Travis. And I like to spend my free time. We have what we call a wakeboard boat. So big boat drags a big wake.
I want to thank Joe for the great conversation. Of course, all of the great work that he and the team over at Merivis are doing to help military veterans get back into the workplace. And thank you for listening. If you want to learn more about this podcast, head on over to developer.salesforce.com/podcast, where you can hear old episodes, see the show notes, and also have links to your favorite podcast service. I'll talk to you next week.